Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here with us this evening. My name is Sarah Skowinski. I'm the Literature and Language Librarian at Portland Public Library. Now, for the reason we're all here today, poetry. The library is honored to sponsor the Portland Poet Laureate project, and it is my personal pleasure to work with our current Poet Laureate, Linda Aldrich. Linda is Portland's 6th Poet Laureate. She has published 2 collections of poetry, Foothold and March and Madwomen, and her poems have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. Linda teaches English at Southern Maine Community College, and in addition to doing countless public readings and being a general champion of poets and poetry as our Poet Laureate, Linda has created this Leaf of Voices series to make a fantastic array of poets and poetry accessible to our community. In the past, we have celebrated new and known poets, teaching poets, and Indigenous poets. Today, we celebrate Maine's legacy of poetry and bicentennial by bringing it forward. Linda, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here and I welcome you all. I recognize some of you from across the street and some of you from Colorado and California and all over the place. So thank you so much for coming. This is Leaf of Voices 4, bringing it forward. And we had intended to do this during April Poetry Month, but obviously things had to change. We've rescheduled it twice, and here we are trying this for the first time. I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to carry on here. We also had intended, in addition to having our 4 wonderful poets who are reading tonight, read poets from the poetry legacy of Maine. We had wanted to bring articles up from the archives to display, and we were not able to do that. But this did bring me to a poet that has to be mentioned tonight, Henry Wordsworth Longfellow. Oh, wait a minute, before we do that, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Sarah Skowinski. I couldn't be doing this without Sarah's help. She's been so amazing. And I thank the Portland Public Library for being the umbrella for the Portland Poet Laureate program. All right. So I visited the Portland room at the library and had a tour by Abraham Schechter, who's the archivist there. And Abraham showed me, of the many things that he had, a really big, thick book, a huge old ledger. And inside were all the handwritten book donations that had been given to the library. Now, before let's see, I have my notes right here. 1889, there were only social libraries where you took out a membership and you had to pay to belong to them. And then there was the Great Fire of Portland on July 4th, 1866. And the several social libraries that existed burned in the fire, one of which was the Athenaeum, and that housed 10,000 volumes. So it wasn't until 1889 that the idea of forming a public library came about, that would be open and free to the public. But there were no books. And this ledger that Abraham showed me shows the books that were donated. And the first 30 or so books came from the personal library of Henry Wordsworth Longfellow, who, as you know, was born in Portland in 1807, when it was still the state of Massachusetts. Longfellow was 13 when Maine became a state in 1820. He, of course, graduated from Bowdoin College in 1825. He taught there for 6 years, and then he moved on to teach at Harvard University. In the books that he donated, I wish I had the specific titles. I couldn't get back in there because of the pandemic. He had collections of abolitionist writings, and he also had the works of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was quite a forward-thinking person, a very generous person. People have spoken of him as a gentle and sweet man. And I will start us off with a little piece of his called "The Day is Done." It's just the very first stanza of this poem. The day is done, and the darkness falls from the wings of night as a feather is wafted downward from an eagle in his flight. I see the lights of the village gleam through the rain and the mist, and a feeling of sadness comes over me that my soul cannot resist. A feeling of sadness and longing that is not akin to pain and resembles sorrow only as the mist resembles the rain. Come read to me some poem, some simple and heartfelt lay that shall soothe this restless feeling and banish the thoughts of day. And my heart goes out to all of you who are here tonight for the grief and the fear that has been washing over us for so many weeks. I'm glad that you can come sit, we can come sit together in this new way. Let me introduce to you all of the 4 poets who will read this evening. First, I'm going to introduce Betsy Sholl. Everybody see Betsy? There she is. Say hello again.
Hello.
Okay. Betsy Sholl's 9th collection of poetry is House of Sparrows, new and selected from the University of Wisconsin, winner of the 4 Lakes Prize. Her 8th collection, Otherwise Unseeable, also from the University of Wisconsin Press, won the 2015 Maine Book Award for Poetry. Other awards include the Felix Pollock Prize, the Associated Writing Programs Prize for Poetry, and a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. She teaches in the MFA in Writing program of Vermont College of Fine Arts and served as Poet Laureate of Maine from 2006 to 2011. Next is Colin Cheney.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Colin. Colin Cheney is the author of Here Be Monsters, a National Poetry Series selection. He has received a Pushcart Prize and a Ruth Lilly Fellowship. His work has appeared in publications such as Poetry, the Kenyon Review, Agony, American Poetry Review, Gettysburg Review, and Plowshares. He attended Brown University as an undergraduate and New York University for his MFA. He is creator and co-host of the podcast Poet in Bangkok and a founding editor of Tongue, a journal of writing and art. He also co-produced the Emmy-nominated documentary film, The City Dark. He is interim chair and visiting professor at the Salt Institute for Documentary Studies at the Maine College of Art. Welcome, Colin. The next is Gretchen Berg.
Hi.
There she is. Gretchen Berg is a performance artist and educator who works in public schools to integrate theater, dance, and classroom curriculum. Currently the lead teaching artist for Portland-based arts organization Side by Side. She has taught performance and education courses at Bowdoin College, Bates College, and the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is 1/3 of Portland's modern dance company, Berg, Jones, and Sarvis, works in rural schools through the Local Stories Project, and is most interested in creating new works. Welcome, Gretchen. Our next poet is Stuart Kestenbaum.
Hi.
Stuart Kestenbaum is our current Maine State Poet Laureate. He is the author of 5 collections of poems, most recently How to Start Over from Deerbrook Editions 2019, and a collection of essays, The View from Here, Bryn Morgan Press. He's the host of the Maine Public Radio program, Poems from Here, and the host-curator of the podcast, Make Time. The director of the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts from 1988 until 2015, he has written and spoken widely on craft making and creativity. And his poems and writing have appeared in numerous small press publications and magazines, including Tikkun, The Sun, the Beloit Poetry Journal, the New York Times Magazine, and on the Writer's Almanac and American Life in Poetry. Former U.S. Poet Laureate Ted Kooser has written, Stuart Kestenbaum writes the kind of poems I love to read, heartfelt responses to the privilege of having been given a life. No hidden agendas here, no theories to espouse, nothing but life, pure life, set down with craft and love. Thank you, Stuart. And I am just delighted to welcome all 4 of you, my poet friends are here tonight. And we'll start with Betsy.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sarah, and to Portland Public Library for keeping the literary arts going. And to Linda for planning this, and to my very esteemed fellow poets. I'm honored to read with you. So when Linda first suggested this event, the idea was to bring forward some poets from the past. And I got it in my head to find a poet from 1820, a poet from 1920, and then I was the 2020 poet. So I found a poem. I am not promoting this as great poetry, actually, but I found a poem published in January 1820 by a person named Timothy Claimwright, about whom I could find no details, so it could be a pen name. But it was written in response to the Missouri Compromise. And I was surprised to find out that there was a large segment of the Maine population that was opposed to the Missouri Compromise because they didn't want to become a state if it meant bringing a slave state into the Union. So that is what this poem is about. And it's long, and I'm only going to read certain parts, the beginning and the middle, perhaps the very end. By Timothy Claimwright. Maine not to be coupled with the Missouri question. If the South will not yield, to the West be it known that Maine will declare for a king of her own, and 300,000 of freemen demand the justice bestowed on each state in the land. Free whites of the East are not blacks of the West, and Republican souls on this principle rest, that if no respect to their rights can be shown, they know how to vindicate what are their own. Their patriot zeal has been ever expressed. Their enterprise Europe has often confessed. They are founded on freedom, humanity's right, ordained by God against slavery to fight. And heaven-born liberty sooner than yield, the whites of Missouri shall dress their own field. And then he goes on maligning Missouri for a while, and then we come to this. They, meaning the Missourians, they, too lazy to work, drive slaves whom they fear. We school our children and brew our own beer. We do a day's work and go fearless to bed. Though locked up, they dream of slaves whom they dread. We have learned too much wisdom to emigrate west, as poor souls returning too well can attest. With this principle hold as fixed as fate, independent of them, we will be a state. And the poem goes on. I just thought it was so interesting to see poetry used as part of the public forum. You know, not written especially by a poet, but by someone who felt poetry was a means of conveying a passionate issue. So for a poet from 1920, among all I looked at, I thought about Marsden Hartley, who most of us know as a modernist painter, but he also wrote poems and essays. He was born in Lewiston in 1877 and lived many places, but came back to Maine and died here in 1943. What interests me in his work is the way it suggests a painter's eye. And again, it's poetry written from somebody who had a wide span of interest, not just writing, but painting as well. This first poem is called Fishmonger, and I'm not quite sure who the speaker is, possibly a lover, possibly a deity. Fishmonger. I have taken scales from off the cheeks of the moon. I have made fins from blue jays' wings. I have made eyes from damsons in the shadow. I have taken flushes from the peach lips of the sun. From all these, I have made a fish of heaven for you, set it swimming on a young October sky. I sit on the bank of the stream and watch the grasses in amazement as they turn to ashy gold. Are the fishes of the rainbow still beautiful to you, for whom they are made, for whom I have set them swimming? And then a very short poem in a very different mood, very spare, sort of like William Carlos Williams and kind of darker. But again, the painter's eye. It's called The Very Languor. The very languor of the morning showing August is preparing for death because now sleeping. The crowing of the bantam, the red cheek of a single dahlia, the fluttering of the wash on the line against the vastness of the horizontal sea. How terrifying at times the flat line can be, or the crowing of a bantam with a red cheek of dahlia. The very languor of the morning is also so. So going to 2020, this is a poem that I actually wrote, I guess during our time in social isolation. It's set in a dealership where I spent 2 hours last summer and just took a few notes. And the details are from some of them from the Portland newspaper last July. And it's just what happened during 2 hours waiting for my Honda to get fixed at the dealership. The morning paper they given us to distract us grieves for 8 bikers killed on the road and an airport bombed in the Middle East. It welcomes new refugees from Angola to our small city, which has opened the sports arena to offer housing. A friend texts that she's had a sleepless night and feels weepy. My love, for whom reading's grown difficult, opens a National Geographic to wild animals used to draw tourists, then hobbled and caged, pangolins almost killed to extinction for their scales. My daughter puts a photo on Facebook of herself at 3 in jeans and cowboy boots, so young I almost weep at that bright face. Salesmen bring good news for some, big repairs for others. The rest of us check the time, settle in. My husband turns the page and there's the Sargasso Sea, itself like a turning gyre, surrounded by 4 currents and no land. Around us, a businessman phones in to change appointments. An elderly man cups his ear to catch his wife's words. A young woman scrolls through her phone. On the paper's front page, people stare at a sea of cots, having traveled far and still not done. A pot of whales is held in small, filthy tanks in Russia, whose language my husband once spoke. He, for whom our daughter waited each evening on the porch, dancing as he pulled in the drive. He who changed oils, rotated tires whenever the car needed. Now, how strange to think of a sea without land, the doldrums of little sleep and long waits, the way we grow porous in stalled transit, endless currents of longing and grief. When it's finally our time to pay, I ask the manager to roll up his sleeve and show us again his tattoo. 6 stick figures with smiling heads and small waving hands. A drawing his children made for him, and he's had inked on his arm so he can carry them as long as his arm exists. Hopefully my dog will stay calm. I can't mute him. So this reading is in a virtual library, and libraries are about books. And so I have a poem about reading. It kind of traces my young poet self and how my thoughts about poems and books changed, I guess. But it's full of quotes. So some of you will recognize some of the quotes. I guess I'll just say that if it sounds good, I'm probably quoting somebody. And the last quote, the last line you'll recognize from The Tempest. So this is on reading. I used to think the things I read weren't real, not as rain is real, or soap, or feta cheese. That words in books were 2D, like watching wind through a closed window and longing to be swayed. Despite having read it in a book, I wanted the wreck and not the story of the wreck. Then out walking a country road one fall, as goldenrod flared and apples dropped into wet grass, I realized I was looking through a scrim of mists and mellow fruitfulness. And along the shore, I saw water the color of mutton fat jade. Saw too in every museum, before every statue, whole or hacked, what I wanted was the shiver of you must change your life. And so I came to Augustine, overhearing a child in the next house chant Tolle lege, take up and read, as God or the wind or his own tearful anguish lifted child's play to prophecy. Words piercing his soul, real as zero at the bone, as Whitman's mockingbird waking in him the fire, the sweet hell within of love's longing, which words woke me too, real as the water that almost drowned me, as the shock of waiting on shore, sea-choked but alive. O Jonah, Ishmael, O granddaughter, I saw the midwife draw sleepy-eyed and small-shouldered from your mother's spent body, and hardly thinking, heard myself cry, O brave new world that hath such people in it. And I'll close with another poem that has a grandchild in it. I hadn't realized that until just this moment. I have a grandson who turned 10, well, a year or so ago now, and this poem is about his birthday party. I'm hoping it kind of mixes all our uncertainties of the experience with a kind of hope to embrace. It's called Birthday Party, Fairy Beach. And the first 4 words are a quote the speaker hears somebody say. The hand of God on the lips of a bikinied woman as she trudges through the sand with a friend could be wind or a burning tree, a stranger brushing her shoulder, or maybe a kind of answer to the boy newly 10 who's just asked if being grown up is hard. What to say? Even the history of these stones tossed by waves and now skipped across them by the boy may include fire, ice, crushed ferns. So little is straightforward. First the kiss he gave his mother, then his squirm out of her arms back to the water. Whoever said love isn't complicated, if he wasn't a fool, must have passed through some burning gate found only by those who have stopped trying to grasp or explain. How to tell the boy, none of us, when we agreed to breathe, crawl, walk, read, knew the journey would not reveal itself in advance. So our best maps are dreams, Escher-like roads that dissolve, then reappear, looped through tilting scaffolds. But never mind, never mind. Now the boy's mother photographs the sky, slant of clouds rippled and glowing, a sermon in which awe overwhelms uncertainty and dread has no place, here where low tide reflects the splendor overhead. Yes, the sky will dissolve its radiant path as if to say looking elsewhere is not the answer. This will turn into that, cake into crumbs, bright wrappings into balled up trash. And yes, it is hard, but there are gifts, child, gifts, you among them. And now I will turn it over to Colin Cheney.
Thanks so much, Betsy. So thank you all for gathering here this evening. This is definitely the closest that I've ever come to reading poetry on Star Trek. But also it has a little bit of a feeling of kind of an old school reading in a bar, because you can kind of see with participants count, like who is kind of walking in and out of the bar based on how excited or boring they find your poem. So I like that. I like that connection. So not that I'm going to be checking that at all while I'm reading these poems. But thanks so much to Linda and Sarah and the Portland Public Library. And I'm just so thrilled to read tonight with Betsy and Gretchen and Stu. I'm reading tonight from unceded Wabanaki ancestral land, which is an important part of the story of our gathering here tonight. I'm going to read 3 short poems by others, and then a few that I think I wrote myself last time checked in. Elizabeth Coatsworth lived at Chimney Farm in Nobleboro for some 57 years. She wrote many beautiful books, my favorite of which is Personalized Geography, if you can get a hold of that. She called it almost an autobiography. And this is a poem called Whale at Twilight that was published in the New Yorker in 1950. The sea is enormous, but calm with evening and sunset, rearranging its islands for the night, changing its own blues, smoothing itself against the rocks without playfulness, without thought. No stars are out, only seabirds flying to distant reefs. No vessels intrude, no lobstermen haul their pots. Only somewhere out toward the horizon, a thin column of water appears and disappears again, and then rises once more, tranquil as a fountain in a garden where no wind blows. This is a poem by Theodore Ensslin, and he lived for years in Millbridge, Maine, and his poems are absolutely lovely and are very much informed by his study of music and his passion for music. He enjoyed being called a composer who used words. He thought that was a marvelous compliment. This is a poem called The Glass Harmonica. It snowed in far country, north and beyond the trees. As I went through the mirror, my breath froze, clouding it, and they saw me no longer in the villages of spring. I walked alone across level plains, and my tracks disappeared in the snow which went with me. A wind rose, playing on harp strings and reeds. There was nothing there, and my fingers touched ice. A music, an echo of music. Sound, not a sound, in the quiet north country, the snow. And this last poem by someone who is not me, Bob Creeley was born in Arlington, Massachusetts, and died in Odessa, Texas. But he was my neighbor in Waldoboro during my childhood there. But it was only during college that I put it together that Bob Creeley, my neighbor, was Robert Creeley, the poet. I was, it seems, a rather inattentive child. This is a poem called Waldoboro Eve. Trees haze in the fog coming in. Late afternoon sun still catches the stones. Dogs waiting to be fed by the empty sink. I hear the people shift in their rooms. That's all finally there is to think. Now comes night with the moon and the stars. Tonight is my father's birthday. So I'm dedicating this reading of my poems, at least, to him tonight. He bought a burnout farmhouse on the Knox-Lincoln County line in 1979, and has been working on creating it as a place of gathering to this day. And he and my mother are there this evening, gathered just themselves, because that is what we do during this time. But it has been a place of gathering and will once again be such. This is a poem about one of those gatherings. It's called Our Blood Aligns Towards Something. The mussels brined light in cold china. Friends come the coastal route and we toast, we have made it, laughing, here we are, all of us. 2 carry malaria, though D pays no mind. J feels the protozoa as birds moving in her blood, like iron tuned to latitude. R has lost his sense of taste. The bones beneath his eyes were shattered before Christmas, walking from the ice rink in Brooklyn. The screws holding his skull in place are the word dovetail. For the texture, he says, he serves himself roast garlic and white beans and vinegar, pork loin with tarragon and walnuts and thyme. D will grow feverish within the week and walk through Cambridge rain to a hospital where they won't recognize his symptoms. In Burundi, they pull everyone off his brother's bus and kill many on sight. This too before Christmas, before he found his way home. There is iron in a bird's skull. The snow settles out in the blue trees of Maine. This is a poem called Glacial Erratics. My father called to say he finds my work quite different from Coleridge. A cloud, an immigrant leaving his wife some flowers. I woke thinking all the wrong things. Kate mailed us some masks and I promised her some seeds, but the baneberry and bloodroot and withe-rod viburnum are sold out. I can keep friends, but not too close. I walked my kids to the wharf and we practiced standing against the rain and wind and then retreating to the lee of some equipment I don't recognize that is meant, I believe, to convince certain beasts to give themselves up to you. Red columbine, maybe? Bone set? My daughter gives me a small envelope containing her request that I write her back. I imagine a painting in which only the lichen of things is rendered visible. How it occurs to me that when my father stands on Clary Hill, imagining himself beneath or maybe made part of the glacier pressing down hard on the blueberry barrens, there must have been no barrens or meadow or forest or nothing. just slow weight and pressure and process. Incorporate, to make part of a body as a bird's corpse in a wax brick. Eastern shooting star, little blue stem. What we leave behind, melting too fast, and what we didn't mean to leave behind, a charm to stay, the morning star. Daughter, I begin, dear daughter. More people have wandered into the bar. All right, we're doing okay. This poem is called Xanthoria elegans. It's named after a lichen I'm quite fond of. On the Mackworth Causeway, a bullet and half an oyster's shimmering inner life. I recognized too on the embankment granite the elegant sunburst lichen usually found on gravestones. And there are the gravestones, my son likes to sing, as we round toward our unfinished house. When you die, he says, falling out of song, you go under there, right? Under the suffering red pines on the windward part of the island, I met a former student and her boyfriend. They'd woken that morning, she explained, to a man digging under their forsythia, or perhaps they said tulips, or maybe they didn't actually say, with the skin of his hands for a ziplock of drugs he'd buried there, shallow. Buried, they said. Buried? How are you meant to say it? Playing the word until I could only see the man's fingers stained sumac, chokecherry, mulberry, and then he crawled under the porch and just stayed there. My student had made, I remembered, a story about habits of squirrels in another city, something about how they hide more acorns than they can possibly remember, and the oaks rely on their forgetting to take seed. Later in the afternoon, wanting to write this but unable to find the space, I would listen to a potter describe a series of urns she's making, 1,000 or so, one for each endangered species. The mortician she'd consulted in Missoula had explained the equation necessary to convert each body's mass of bones, black-crowned night heron, juniper hairstreak, little brown bat, into the volume of ash the urn must hold. And when I leaned under there, my student said, hey man, what's going on? Is everything okay? He said, yeah, sorry, I just lost something down here. And that lichen of hunter's orange is the same species we sent into orbit and left in the vacuum and radiation above the planet for 2 weeks before bringing it back inside, the lichen, and returning it to Earth where it kept growing like nothing at all had happened. When he crawled out from under the porch, she said, his hands empty, he said, I need to go pick up my son, and walked off down the street like nothing at all had happened. And I left them after thanking them for being in the poem, and rounded past the ferry houses and trail to the school for the hard of hearing, and past the pet cemetery Governor Baxter kept for his 17 greyhounds and a horse named Jerry. As we pull into our driveway, my son asks, half sing-song, so the dead people live underground now. It's possible that my children are listening to this reading from the next room because they seem to be enjoying something. So it's either me or the Mickey Mouse Club. I'm gonna say it's me for the moment. I'm gonna read two more poems. This is called End Time Singers. When I pass the off-night revival uphill from glockenspiel lace, become baseball card shop, become crematorium, become mid-coast vape. The maw of the tied-back tent reveals empty folding chairs and congregation. Yellow grass kept from the sun. I drive on, my amygdala ringing with trillium, poverty, tick, woodpecker, rot. I've been struggling with where best to preserve my daughter's joy. Scallop half shell, headless doll, ziplock of black mica. Her songs are not my mind's turning of the world in a dark lathe. She gives them away freely to oak seedlings, bug bite scars, broken glass in a circle of beheaded weeds. But the hollow art museum after fire, the seed bank thawing, radioactive sarcophagus worry me that so little holds. and to sing this way makes it true. I sit at the stoplight in the valley carved by the old Madamic, a wreath hung from the guardrail. I realize what the sign outside the tent had read: End Time Singers. The gray pines, how they must sway to such praise lifted up each night and breathe in all this fear given human tongue. My daughter's joy, a bag of acorns for spring, Miss Marvel comic by the toilet, embroidered slippers reeking of their dyes, joy despite what she reads, behind her own reflection when I look her in the eyes each morning. This is my last poem. Thank you again so much for being here at this little speakeasy we've gathered on the internet. This poem may return to one of the poets that I introduced earlier in the evening, not Betsy. It's called Elegy for a Dog with Looking Glass and Black Hole. Someone made a dragon of field stone on Clary Hill, and someone's unbuilt the beast back into Blueberry Barren. My wife said they spread his ashes this afternoon, mistaking the dead dog for his dead poet. I aimed my phone at each species unknown to me, and the satellites said Venus's looking glass, milkwort, orange, something I can't say now. I have no signal here in the mountains by a fire, and my memory is not my mother's, who would say of this blossom, that's not what it is. And my father'd reply, I've always known it as pearly, everlasting. Blueberry, blueberry, blueberry. My neighbor and her husband accompanied the dead dog's person, the dead poet's widow, to the upper field to spread his ashes. And when a small rain began, they addressed him, the dog, that is, and said, you knew we were doing this for you, Jack. His ashes, the perfect snowy ash of his coat. I wasn't there. But from the hill, I studied the silhouette of the Dragon Cement Factory against the hazy line of sea to the east and watched my daughter. My grandfather, dead before she was born, would have called her Looking Glass. Climbing the stone wall through the raked field, the Malthion lingering along the spine of a dismembered heraldic beast, balancing and then releasing herself stone to stone over melt char bins forgotten before control burn. My fire has gone low ash, then orange, then dark, as I try to point out constellations through the tree canopy, and my son asks, is the star a black hole? Bright embers, I catch fragments of Draco, and the dog star maybe, in the interrupted firmament, the unburned field he's cutting through. My dog, who doesn't yet exist, or at least I'm not yet his. Thank you all so much. Happy birthday, Dad. And next, Gretchen Berg.
All right. Thanks to everybody. This has been even more fun than I thought it was going to be. This is great. I'm first going to read you from some poets from a while back. One is Kate Barnes, and Kate Barnes, she was Maine's actually first poet laureate from 1996 to 2000. Her parents were fabulous writers. One was Elizabeth Coatsworth, who we got to hear from, and also Henry Beston. She lived in Appleton, and I wish I knew her. I wish I did. Everything I know about her is that she loved Maine and horses and dogs and poetry. And I'm going to read you a poem called Another Full Moon. And I just love, it's such an immediate feeling poem to me. The house, lit by moonlight on the snow, glows inside like a huge jewel, a moonstone or opal. The whole house shimmers with its freight of living souls and the souls of disembodied memory. I lie inside my warm bed in the cold brightness, dreaming of those who can no longer dream, of anyone, who have become motes of dust in the air, those universal dreamers. You would imagine, looking into the next room, that a lamp was lit, but I know it only is the light of the moon westering, nearly full, over the snow. I am not wanting or asking anything impossible. It's just that I can't help thinking about it. This next poem is by Edwin Arlington Robinson. He lived from 1869 to 1935. He got the Pulitzer Prize 3 times. He grew up in Gardner. He said his childhood was stark and unhappy. He was this really kind of grim, miserable guy from Gardner, and we all know miserable guys from Gardner. But he was bleak. He was playful, and he objected to free verse. He really liked to rhyme. This is called Reuben Bright. Because he was a butcher and thereby did earn an honest living and did right, I could not have you think that Reuben Bright was any more brute than you or I. For when they told him that his wife must die, he stared at them, and he shook with grief and fright and cried like a great baby half that night, and made the women cry to see him cry. And after she was dead, and he had paid the singers and the sexton and the rest, he packed a lot of things that she had made most mournfully away in an old chest of hers, and put some chopped up cedar boughs in with them, and tore down the slaughterhouse. Here's another poem from somebody else besides us. This is by Edna St. Vincent Millay. A lot of us know her. She was born in Rockland. She was raised in Camden. She lived an incredible life, a lot of it in New York City and Greenwich Village. Won the Pulitzer Prize. She was a celebrity. She was scandalous. She was a feminist and activist. She was quite the gal, and she could write sonnets. She was good at that. And she also wrote things like plays and librettos, but here's a sonnet. Time does not bring relief. You have all lied who told me time would ease me of my pain. I miss him in the weeping of the rain. I want him at the shrinking of the tide. The old snows melt from every mountainside, and last year's leaves are smoke in every lane. Heaped on my heart, and my old thoughts abide, there are 100 places where I fear to go. So go with his memory, they brim, and entering with relief some quiet place where never fell his foot or shone his face, I say there is no memory of him here. And so stand stricken, so remembering him. I'm going to read you one of my poems. It's been pretty wild trying to write these last couple months, but I wrote one that has to do with a library initially, so here we are. It's called A Beginning. Fridays after dinner, we'd go to the library. Freddie the Pig, plus growing up looking books for Lawrence. For me, blue biographies where nothing famous happened to Nellie Bly or Swamp Fox until the last chapter. Plus at least one Enid Blyton adventure book. After ice cream cones, we drove home, thirsty in the back seat, ready to read. I'd already read the Narnia books, so I was clear on the ingredients: treacles, torches, Turkish delight, 4 kids on holiday saying, "Do, let's." Occasionally a helpful adult appeared, but mostly grown-ups were dangerous. In the adventure, island of adventure, the castle of adventure, the valley, the sea, the mountain, the ship, the circus, the river, whatever of adventure. Here now, in the pandemic of adventure, we 4 friends have not yet been sent to the country to wait it out. There's no brusque cook who lays out our afternoon tea and gingerbread. No kindly professor ignores us as we explore long halls, enchanted woods, and abandoned mines. The wardrobe's just a closet full of coats, sleeping bags, and old suitcases. But when summer comes, we'll build a raft and float to safety. Let's see. I've lived in Maine most of my life, but I grew up in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. And in the summer, we'd go to the Ozarks to visit my mom's family and my cousins. This is called Geodes. Outside, she made me watch her kill chickens. Inside was breakfast, biscuits, post toasties, and cold fried chicken. Outside, Grandpa beat the roosters away from me with his cane. Inside, I stood naked on the table under bright lights while Grandma picked off ticks. Each summer we drove there from Virginia to visit Ozark cousins, watch baptisms and cottonmouths at the river, find a can of bacon grease by the slop bucket, broom and rifle behind the bedroom door. When Grandma and Grandpa moved into town, Grandpa still wore his overalls, his brown squeeze top coin purse and green double mint gum in the pocket. Funny and mean, smelling like an oily shed and dirt, he drove me out to the old farm in his blue pickup. No one was there. They were at church in town. By the outhouse, he pushed up behind me, then reached around. It was wrong, so I ran and climbed back into the back of the pickup. He said something about loving him, but I wouldn't sit up front. Never again. We drove off the farm road to the highway into Mountain View, where Grandma and Mom were back from church and getting dinner cooked. In the dirt out at the farm, my brother, my cousins, and I would hunt for tan, lumpy, baseball-sized rocks and break them wide open. A sledgehammer worked best, but we made do with whatever we got us inside ones lined with white crystals and sometimes purple gems. They were real. But in Virginia, they said, how could dirty, hollow rocks hide jewels? I'm gonna read you two more. I really like making lists. So these are both kind of listy. Betsy's clapping for the lists. This one's called When I Go to Hell. When I go to hell, I'll be an event planner or open a bed and breakfast. I'll wait for people to return my calls and I'll be CC'd on everything. On the other side of each wall, a TV blares. Every night is open mic night and the only empty seats are in the front row. Never alone, I'm always within earshot of parents telling toddlers good job when they eat some crackers, or looking disappointed and speaking sarcastically to their teenagers. On the porch, loud men tell stories about humiliating their subordinates. There are no seasons and plenty of parking. No meals, just snacks. Between shopping for Christmas presents and judging poster contests, we gather for Satan's PowerPoint, then break into sweaty groups to list goals and objectives on big pieces of white paper. Okay, here's my last one. It's another list. And then you get to hear from Stu. This is called Social Distancing. I miss dreading social events, cash, and eavesdropping. I long for bad cologne, pink eye, making nasty asides and registering the car. I want to whisper, interrupt, and overshare. Tell tourists that Forest Street restaurant is on 4th Street. I yearn for body odor, root canals, switching from zone defense to one-on-one, Jehovah's Witnesses, CPR, and library fines. I miss circling the block, unsolicited advice, broken escalators, complaining about something else, and you. Stu, you're on.
Thanks, Gretchen. Thanks to Linda and the Portland Library. I used to live in Portland, now I live in Deer Isle. So this is like one of the easiest commutes. I didn't have to stop at Dunkin' Donuts in Belfast. I didn't have to stop at the Starbucks at the West Gardner rest stop. I just got to sit here. So I've saved like 3 hours, 6 hours of my life. What will I do with those hours? I don't know. But I'm going to start with 3 poems. Gretchen already told you about Edna St. Vincent Millay, so I will just read this poem, which is, to me, was very different from her other work that I knew, and it's called Conscientious Objector. I shall die, but that is all that I shall do for death. I hear him leading his horse out of the stall. I hear the clatter on the barn floor. He is in haste. He has business in Cuba, business in the Balkans, many calls to make this morning. But I will not hold the bridle while he clinches the girth. And he may mount by himself. I will not give him a leg up. Though he flicks my shoulder with his whip, I will not tell him which way the fox ran. With his hoof on my breast, I will not tell him where the black boy hides in the swamp. I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. I am not on his payroll. I will not tell him the whereabouts of my friends, nor of my enemies either. Though he promises me much, I will not map him the route to any man's door. Am I a spy in the land of the living, that I should deliver men to death? Brother, the password and the plans of our city are safe with me. Never through me shall you be overcome. They don't teach you that poem in school, I don't think. This is a poem by Kate Barnes, and it's about her dog, called Why Do You Ask? I can't make any story about my life tonight. The house is like an overturned wastebasket. The radio is predicting more rain. I ask my dog to tell me a story, and she never hesitates. Once upon a time, she says, a woman lived with a simply wonderful dog, and she stops talking. Is that all? I ask her. Yes, she says. Why do you ask? Isn't that enough? I read that poem on the radio for Poems from Here, and I later got a letter from a woman who had been driving with her old dog, and she was about to have the dog euthanized. And she heard that, and she said she almost drove off the road. She had to pull over because she said she wasn't a spiritual person, a religious person, but she said that came as close to a profound spiritual moment that she had, and she was able to find peace in putting her dog down after that. So this is a poem by Philip Booth, whose family is from Castine, and he taught for many years at Syracuse University and then moved back to Maine. And it's called Saying It. Saying it, trying to say it, not to answer to logic, but leaving our very lives open to how we have to hear ourselves say what we mean. Not merely to know, all told, our far neighbors, or hear beside us now the stranger we sleep next to. Not to get it said and be done, but to say the feeling, its present shape, to let words lend it dimension, to name the pain, to confirm how it may be born, through what in ourselves we dream to give voice to find some word for how we bear our lives. Daily, as we are daily wed, we say the world is a wedding for which, as we are constantly finding, the ceremony has not yet been found. What wine, what bread, what language sung? We wake at night to imagine, and again wake at dawn to begin, to let the intervals speak for themselves, to listen to how they feel, to give pause to what we're about, to relate ourselves over and over in time beyond time, to speak some measure of how we hear the music today, if ever, to say the joy of trying to say the joy. Well, this is a library poem. This last couple of months I've been working on revisions and some new pandemic work. And this one starts in the Deer Isle Library, and the only thing I think you need to know about it is the last sentence has the words pray and pray, and one is pray, P-R-E-Y, and the other is pray, P-R-A-Y. On the Road. Today, I discovered a cassette tape at the Deer Isle Library book sale. David Carradine reading On the Road, so that right on the island where John Steinbeck started his travels with Charlie Journey across America, Jack Kerouac had returned from drinking and typing on endless rolls of paper, wrote without stopping about the speed of America, about the road, about our lives moving across the blacktop where the gas pumps stand at attention and salute us. There was the Prince of the Beats in a boxed plastic set that may never have been listened to. Let's find an old car that still has a working cassette player so we can get him out on the road again and he can move from east to west. He can rediscover his own soul, which is waiting for him at every gas station and diner, in every coffee cup and ashtray. This is the pilgrim passing through the world, speeding by the guardrails that protect us from fate and the billboards that sell us a happiness that doesn't exist, the hawks spiraling overhead, drifting upward on the air currents. They understand some secret we don't know yet, how we don't need to propel ourselves as much as we need to let ourselves be propelled, stretch out our wings and drift upward on the day's heat where prey and prey are one. You know, we're all living through the pretty strange time all together separately, which I guess you could always say about the world all the time, but it seems more particular now. So this is a poem about blessing. It's called Litany. Bless us with the first breath of morning. Bless the packet of seeds for the garden, shaking like a shaman's rattle in prayer. Bless us with spare change in our pockets to give to the homeless. Bless us with a heart that has been serviced by the mechanic. Bless us with good tires on the icy road. Bless us so that we're not just covering our own asses, but weeping for the rest of the world. Bless our tears so that they irrigate the land for the starving, that there be no more drought. Bless us with one idea after another, that we might sort out the good from the bad. Bless us with free lunches and subscriptions. Bless us with a winter storm so big that it closes everything down and for a week, and we can find ourselves at the beginning of time. Bless us with water, bless us with light, bless us with darkness, and bless us with language. Bless our tongues that we can speak, bless our cars so they start, bless our computers so that they may connect to the internet and bring us news of the universe. Bless Robert Bly and Gloria Steinem, bless all the worn out athletes whose bodies are falling apart. Bless the tides twice a day and the moon every month. Bless the sun, bless us as we are blessing you, for this is a two-way street after all, and we're in this thing together. Bless mass transit and the first cup of coffee. Sing, O ye frost heaves and icy patches, praise the spruce trees all crowded together, the crows and the trees flying heavenward and earthward, flying everywhere in between. Bless the night with its constellations that we have dreamed up. Bless our stories that they may somehow be true, for this is all we have. Bless all creatures great and small, and the basket makers who weave together a framework to hold emptiness. Bless the empty spaces that are within us, between each cell in our body, and in the vast distances between each cell. Bless each cell, which is its own universe, ready to divide, split in two, and make more than enough. I must have had some premonition, because I wrote this poem before the 2016 election. And it's from a series that I did where I asked people to give me words, and I would take the words. Betsy actually was one of the people who gave words, and I had physicists and scientists, and people would send me words, and I would have to use those words in a poem. I didn't know what they were before I got them, and I just would pick them out and have to write the poem. And in this poem, I was given the words cement, conflagration, deteriorating evergreen flight, gawk, moonbeam, pinhole camera, row, satisfaction, serendipity, sharks, silky, sleep, thistle, and worth, and work those into a poem. It's called How to Start Over. We knew that things were deteriorating, Gothic houses collapsing, sharks patrolling the lagoons, the born-again ministers warning of an immediate conflagration. All the flights to paradise had been canceled, and even pinhole cameras weren't letting light in. It got to be so bad we didn't want to listen to the news anymore, where all we were doing was gawking at someone else's trouble. It wasn't worth the effort. Where was the satisfaction we longed for? We couldn't sleep, so we would spend all night watching the full moon's beams cement themselves to the silky water and travel for miles on the waves. Someone was rowing along the shore, and in the silver light, the evergreens were shaking slightly. At the edge of the forest, the thistles were attaching themselves to the fur of animals. What serendipity to hitch a ride to your future. And this is my last poem, called The Work at Hand. You wake from the dream, uncertain if you are living in this world or the next, pretty sure that no one is dreaming you, but unsure if someone might be dreaming this world, watering the flowers, shaping the clouds, and watching the birds build their nests, a skill or art or craft, a beautiful necessity, while we inhale and exhale the deep breath of our days, our anonymous days, our days of shopping lists and headlines, the days that we dream ourselves up and out the door and on our way to work. And what is our work but to scatter the seeds and dream ourselves whole? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that was a powerful parcel of poetry we've been listening to. I am very deeply grateful to all four of you for having read tonight, for having read what you did read, and for the way you read the things that you read. I just felt something inside of me almost want to weep. It is lovely to be together this way. It really is. I suddenly feel the wonder of it. I was so nervous about it, and now I feel this is all right. I like this. It feels very personal all of a sudden. I am so happy to be in Maine and to be part of this heritage of poets and to be in the presence of such fine poets as yourselves, really. I hope that 100 years from now, someone will pull a poem of yours out and read it, or 200 years from now, someone will pull out 2 of your poems and read them. I hope that we're still here. I guess, I hope that, and that we are well, and that we have a better world. A question is, how has the lockdown affected your writing? And this is a question for all of you. Has it brought you into a state of panic? Has it been productive? What has it done for you? Do you anyone want to address that?
I've been writing more regularly and have the time to go through poems, things that I hadn't looked at for a while. So I feel like I have more time to stay with things.
I haven't written a lot of new poems, but I had a lot of drafts from the fall. So I've been writing differently. I've been, as opposed to flitting from poem to poem to poem, I've been working more steadily on individual poems. But yeah, I think I have a little more time, and writing feels like it's one stabilizing factor in the endlessly changing news. But I have to say, for me, it's mostly been a lot of revising.
Yeah, I think all I'd add is that I have less time. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and somehow adult things somehow still manage to happen, like work. But I've been finding that just a kind of an old ritual of first thing in the morning, just writing something raw in a notebook, if I have 15 or 20 minutes, and that's all I may write for the day. But that's been a really a really important practice, and I'm very grateful that that my notebook and pen and brain and the universe align to allow me that. But it's lovely to be here and hear these poems tonight, because I'm sure my notebook will get some transmutation of them tomorrow morning.
I found it hard to write. I mean, I found it hard to focus. I mean, I like what I do, fine, but I feel like I should be learning Arabic or, doing all these incredible things. And so I find it hard to focus, but when I do, I kind of like it.
I think we'll draw it to a close then. And it's really nice to have all of you come. And it's just been great to be together. Thank you so much, Stu, Gretchen, Betsy, and Colin. Let's give them a wave. And thank you, Sarah. And good night, everyone. Bye.